Hi everyone, this is Lauren Baker, founder of Search Engine Journal. And today I have a very special SEJ marketing think tank and a full house. So today we're going to be discussing how digital marketers can leverage schemas to drive SEO performance and voice search. And in terms of a full house, we have with us Michelle Robbins of Milestone, Toa Ghosh of VMware, and Christy Olson of Bing. So could you all just take a moment to say hi to everyone?
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Good morning.
All right, great. So before we get started, and just to give everyone a chance that hasn't jumped on yet to come in, I'm going to go ahead and do some housekeeping, and then I'll turn everything over to Michelle, Toa, and Christy. Again, thanks for attending today's SEJ Marketing Think Tank. As you'll see at the bottom of the slide, we have our official hashtag SEJ Think Tank. So if you can take the time and let everyone know on Twitter what they're missing out on, please go ahead and do so. Also, please feel free to take screenshots along the way and share them as well. Today's webinar is brought to us by SEJ partner Milestone. So you'll see the Milestone's Twitter handle at the bottom as well, at Milestone. That's short for marketing, MKTG, I believe. So please feel free to tag Milestone and all of our attendees as well in Twitter too. Just to let everyone know, we will be sending out the video of today's webinar to all attendees, as well as publishing an update and a recap on Search Engine Journal with the main points of the webinar, transcriptions, slides, and some of the Q&A that we have at the end. Just to let everyone know, during the course of the webinar itself, we'll be having a couple of different polls. So we really would like you to chime in on these polls. It really gives Michelle, Toa, and Christy an idea of who the audience is, what you're looking for, and they can craft some of the presentation around that accordingly. Also, after everyone is finished, we will be dedicating about a 15-minute time segment to Q&A. So as you have questions over the course of these slides in the presentation, please feel free to type them into the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel. At the end of the presentation, we'll be running through the questions for you, and anything that's left unanswered, we'll be following up with that in our recap as well. And just to let everyone know, after today's webinar is over, we'll have a quick survey. If you could take the time to fill that out too, it just makes things all better. So we're 3 minutes in. We have a lot of attendees that are already here, and I'm going to hand things off to you, Michelle, to get started.
Thanks so much, Lauren, and thanks so much for joining us today, everyone who's joined for this webinar. I'm Michelle Robbins. I joined Milestone as the head of digital earlier this year. I have over 20 years experience in search, digital marketing, and technology. And prior to joining Milestone, I was the senior vice president of content and marketing technology at Third Door Media, where I oversaw all of the brand's technology, content strategy, and was editor-in-chief of Search Engine Land, Marketing Land, and MarTech Today. Over to you, Toa.
Hey everyone, my name is Punita Ghosh and I go by Toa. I'm the Senior SEO Manager and SEO Lead here at VMware. So for people who don't know much about VMware, VMware is a global leader in cloud infrastructure, digital workspace technology, which helps in accelerating digital transformation for any evolving IT environment. You can use our products to build digital foundation with software-defined cloud, mobility, networking, and security solutions, and deliver any app to any device with any cloud. So my job here involves planning SEO strategies, execution with help of various cross-functional teams, managing SEO for more than 6 internal business units, evangelizing SEO here at VMware, and managing a team of SEO specialists to deliver impactful results every quarter. So I've been working in this company for about 2.5 years now, and being in the digital marketing industry for 10 years. And just like you, I am an SEO enthusiast and explorer in this mystical world of SEO. And today I'm excited to share the space with 2 other SEO evangelists, and we'll be walking you through a case study which showcases how VMware is benefiting from schema markups on our website. So I really would like to thank each one of you for joining us here today. And thank you, Lauren and Michelle, to give me an opportunity to present VMware's case here.
Thank you, Toa. Christy.
And I am Christy Olson, and it's only fitting that I'm talking about voice search today, and I managed to partially lose my voice. I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm the head of evangelism for Bing and Microsoft Advertising. And really what that means is I do a lot of time researching, investigating what people need to know about search and helping provide information so that you can manage your paid search campaigns even better or answer your questions essentially in organic search as it pertains to rankings. I'll be touching a little bit on Schema, but also some of the results of our 2019 voice search report and how voice and Schema are tied together.
Thanks so much, guys. So at Milestone, we work with some of the top global multi-location brands. We combine our award-winning services with our proprietary marketing technology platform and deliver significant omni-channel growth for all of our clients. And today, Christy, Toa, and I are going to be talking about two of the most important trends happening in search and digital marketing and how they're related. So as we've all seen over the past number of years, mobile and screenless devices are changing search and searcher behavior. In just the past decade alone, we've seen search transform from being text input driven and focused on keywords to being voice driven and focused more on natural language and conversations. With the growth of mobile usage and the adoption of voice interfaces, the imperative of voice search is specifically to deliver the single right answer. So how do we and our clients become that single right answer? Well, one of the strongest indicators for getting that prime placement involves schema. So what is schema? What are we talking about when we start talking about schema? Schema is essentially structured data markup that enables search engines to understand the context of your website content. You can find the full spec at the schema.org website, but essentially the schemas are a set of types, each associated with a set of properties. The types are arranged in a hierarchy, and the core vocabulary consists primarily of 614 different types, 905 properties, and 114 enumeration values. Now, because there are so many types and so many properties, you want to really get familiar with them and understand which can be leveraged with the content you or your client publish. Now, we've seen in our client work, and Christy is going to dive more into her research, that schemas significantly impact voice search devices beyond mobile search on phones, but also with Google Home, Microsoft's Cortana, Amazon's Alexa, and Apple's Siri voice assistants. We see the impact of schemas most often and usually in rich snippets, featured snippets, and things we refer to as position O rankings, like what you're seeing here on this slide. Our audience registration poll indicated that nearly 50% of you have already implemented schema, but for those of you who have not, we have an example here of the hierarchical type of schema for a financial institution. Now, this includes the related properties that each map back to the financial institution entity itself. And this is just one example for obviously one schema type. Most schema types, again, have associated properties that go along with all of them. And here we have an example of how the markup exists on the page. Now you can use a variety of encodings, including RDFA, microdata, and JSONLD, but JSON is typically the most common and what we deploy for our clients. And here you see in the left-hand pane, the back-end code on the page itself. And when you're looking at wanting to test whether or not you've implemented this markup correctly, you're going to use Google's search structured data testing tool. And what you see from the prior slide is the output from that testing tool. Now the tool will evaluate the markup and raise any errors or warnings that you might have on the page so that you can correct them. And having error-free markup is critical to ensuring that you'll get the benefit of having added the schemas. Most importantly, of course, you're going to want to understand the impact of your efforts. So when we look at how we measure success of a schema deployment, we're looking for incremental impressions. We're looking for growth in impressions within a variety of the SERP features, the position 0 featured snippets, rich snippets, things that we discussed. We're also going to be looking for position movement. We're going to want to see improvements in ranking. We're going to also want to see incremental organic sessions, incremental organic driven leads, and incremental organic driven conversions. So for those of you who haven't taken a look at or deployed schema, you might be wondering why. It's going to require development resources. It's not a set it and forget it tactic, so why bother? Well, I think the best way to demonstrate that is by sharing the success we've seen with our own implementations. So here we have a case study from a large fast food restaurant chain. And as you can see, the schemas that were deployed were indexed and already showing significant results within a month, less than a month actually, of being deployed. And we're seeing significant boosts in impressions and clicks, particularly for key unbranded terms. As you can see here, we've got a 60% boost in impressions on unbranded keywords, as well as a 23% boost in clicks on unbranded keywords. This was a case study from a top 5 national bank where we deployed schemas on their Adobe Experience Manager website. And we saw not just a massive growth in impressions and mobile traffic, but also online to offline growth with schemas deployed. For our luxury jewelry chain client, we saw the biggest gains were on mobile devices for both traffic and clicks. We saw 70% more traffic from pages that had schema on them and 30 to 43% more clicks, depending on the device being utilized. Finally, for our luxury hospitality group, it's noteworthy here that the additive and incremental growth in revenue realized when schemas were part of the overall strategy mix. Specifically, we saw a 30% year-over-year increase in revenue through the website by having added schemas as part of their overall omni-channel plan. So while we can demonstrate impressive gains with schema implementation, it's not without its challenges. The complexity of schema architecture and the understanding required to fully leverage all the available schema types that are relevant for your business, vertical, use case, etc., is pretty significant. Schema.org frequently updates the attributes, and this can lead to errors or warnings in your implementation, so constant monitoring and consistent maintenance is needed to fully realize the benefits within search results of having added the schema markup. Finally, schema deployment and website code does require both IT and SEO resources on an ongoing basis. So to mitigate those challenges, we've architected a cloud-based implementation method that enables easy deployment and maintenance with no website IT resources required. Now, this enables us to deliver ongoing schema enhancements as the specs change, your content changes, or additional schema types are added. Now, all of this leads to the kinds of results we've shared in our case studies. So that's what I've got to present on kind of the basics around what schema is and the successes we've seen with our clients. And before passing the mic over to Toa from VMware so she can discuss their approach to schema implementation with Milestone, we've got a quick poll for the audience.
Thanks, Michelle. And I'll be launching the poll right now. So the question is, how important is schema implementation to your organization? A, not important. B, important but not currently a priority. And C, it's an immediate need. So if we could have everyone go ahead and chime in exactly how important schema is and how important its implementation is to you and your organization right now, that would be fantastic. We've had 60% of all attendees vote thus far. Our goal is to get 80%. So I'll give you all a couple more seconds to go ahead and make your selection. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, final chance. And we're close. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now and share the results. It looks like in terms of schema implementation, only 4% of attendees say it's not important, so that's good. And tied, 48% each believe it's an immediate need or are aware of its importance, but it's not currently a priority. Any feedback there, team?
I guess I'm surprised by the not a current priority, and I'm only surprised because of, again, the results that we see are pretty immediate and pretty demonstrable.
Excellent. So I've closed the poll, and have we been able to give presenter mode over to Toa yet?
I've done that.
Okay, I don't have it yet.
I had passed that over. Did you see the pop-up?
No, it's still showing change. Can you see my screen right now?
No.
Not yet.
Okay,
Here we
Now we
go.
can.
there we
There
go.
it is.
Sorry about that. All right, thank you, Michelle and Lauren. So let's take a deeper dive and find out the impact of schema that we had at VMware. So let's start with answering why did we really decide to implement schemas, and moreover, why did we choose to go with milestone solution? So schemas are foundational for entity and voice search. And as Michelle explained some time back, voice search and entity search are two of the most important trends in the search industry today. So schema markup is like a stepping stone to leverage voice search, featured snippets, and entity search results. The second reason why we chose to go with schema is to get competitive edge over the other industry players. And it's always good to leverage a trend early on to get the benefits of competitive advantage. Schemas are important as they help the search engines like Google and Bing to crawl and index your pages and find important content that you would really want to highlight to your audience. Nowadays, schema is almost like your virtual business card. So when a website has schema markups in place, users can see in the SERPs what that website is all about. What are they trying to do? What kind of services are they providing? Their location, plus plenty of other stuff. So like I mentioned previously, schemas are foundational for SEO, but unfortunately, due to its deployment complexities, they're often ignored by webmasters and developers. So that brings us to the next question, why milestone solution? Schema deployment needs IT support. So for a company as big as VMware, schemas were not one of the top priorities for the IT team here. So Milestone Solution was a perfect fit for us since it not only allowed us to deploy the schemas on Milestone's cloud platform easily, but Milestone also helped us in managing the end-to-end process of it. Another reason why we chose Milestone Solution was because of its sustainable mode of maintaining the schemas. And like Michelle said, search engines, they keep adding new schema types. So it becomes really difficult to keep up with all the new updates, especially when you're managing the process in-house. So for example, today if we add an FAQ section to a page, all we need to do is to let Milestone know about the addition, and they would help us in updating the FAQ schema onto that page. So you see the solution is really very basic and simple. So what did we do? We deployed schemas on 500 top priority pages, and I would share the impact with you really soon. Okay, so this slide shows you the impact that we had on featured snippets visibility. And as you know, 80% of the voice search results really stems from featured snippets, and hence it's critical for organizations to increase the visibility of their pages on these results. So after we deployed schema markups on a group of VMware pages, we saw a 97% increase in featured snippets results in just 6 months. If we really had to break down the data, as you can see below, we saw 115% increase in people may also ask results, 170% increase in quick answer results, and 70% improvement in the images result. So on the right, you will see two examples. The first one is basically showing you a result for the search query benefits of virtualization, and you will see VMware's page showing up in the people may also ask section, which is one of the featured snippets type. The second one is showing a result for the search query data center operations, and as you can see, VMware's glossary page is showing up in the quick answer box. So this slide is an interesting slide because it shows the impact of schema within 1 month of implementation. We saw a 24% increase in impressions coming from Google and 23% increase in clicks coming from Google. And this was when compared pre versus post implementation of schemas. Point to note here is that you will always see a higher growth in impressions than clicks right after implementing schemas, as now your web pages might be featuring in more featured snippets like people may also ask or quick answer sections on the search engine result pages. So clicks might go down initially because of that, but always remember that these featured snippets eventually will prove to be extremely helpful to drive back the clicks onto your web pages. This slide shows how much of an impact we had on visits. So we had 33% increase in year-over-year visits within just 6 months. And this slide is basically showing you the improvement in search visibility that we got from different schema types. So here are some schema types that are mentioned here that have really worked for us. And as you can see, we saw huge gains from website, product, web page, and corporation schemas. Now, this is an interesting slide and one of my favorites. So this slide compares the incremental organic clicks and impressions that we got out of the schema project to the average cost of paid media. So from the calculation, we concluded that the cost of paid initiatives for the incremental organic traffic that we received out of the project would have been $159,000 if we just look into the CPC. If we also include this cost per impressions, the cost would have been higher. So what that means is basically we saved the company almost $160,000 by promoting our pages organically instead of going the paid media route. So to conclude, I would just like to say that in order to increase your presence on voice search, start with keyword analysis, know which keywords are throwing a quick answer result or a featured snippet. You can use various tools like SEMrush or BrightEdge to do the analysis. Develop short question and answer based content around that keyword. Make sure that you have schemas on your pages and have optimized your pages for mobile devices. And I would say last but not the least, have patience to show up in voice search result. And as you know, nothing really happens fast in the world of SEO. So once your pages begin to show up in the above the fold section on Google page 1, your chances of getting featured in the featured snippets will increase, which will then translate into voice search results. So with this, I would like to hand over the presentation to Christy from Bing, who has great things to tell you about voice search. And before that, Lauren would be doing a poll question again. So thank you again for your time.
Excellent. Thank you, Toa. And just to remind everyone, we have some great questions coming in, and we'll be addressing them after the presentation in the Q&A section of today's webinar. So the next poll is, have you allocated dollars to be invested in voice search? Yes or no? So does your company have budget allocated specifically for voice search? Not schema per se, not overall organic, but voice. Yes or no? We have 60% have voted thus far or entered their answers far. So I'll give you a couple more seconds to go ahead and click either yes or no, A or B, whether or not that you've allocated budget over to voice. And before we hand things off to Christy on the Bing team, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, closing the poll. So 81% of you are currently not allocating dollars to be invested in the voice search alone. And 19% have answered yes. And we have a lot of folks explaining why they answered yes or no in the question box, which I'll be going through. But in the meantime, Christy, handing things off to you. And it looks like we still have Toa's slide deck being showed.
Can you go ahead and hand it off to me, please, Toa? It's in the upper window.
It looks like we're in transition right now.
Perfect.
Good to go.
Good to go. Well, thank you guys. And I think one of the ways I'm going to do this a little bit differently than how I'd normally talk about voice, in part because I think that both Michelle and Toa did set it up so well for me to talk about schema first. So as Michelle mentioned, the WC3.org and schema.org come out with brand new type of schema markups on a regular basis. As they mentioned, right now they're just talking about regular schema with entities across the page. But one of the initiatives that's been in place since about 2016 has been to create what's called speakable schema markup. What this is essentially a schema markup that can go on a given page that allow you to tell the digital assistants what you want to be said for the content on a page. It's right now only for text only. We don't want it to be for like source attribution, photo captions, etc. But it allows you to control what is said about the content. Now, it's worth calling out that right now, This is in beta for news articles. You have to essentially be part of Google News or Bing News. But something to consider with this type of schema markup, and why I really want to bring this out to you, is that if you think about AMP, Accelerated Mobile Pages, it also started off as just a news-based initiative, and then it expanded out beyond the news segment. Think of this type of schema markup in a similar way, that even though right now it's supposed to be used within the news context, it will be expanded out after it goes out of the beta to other websites, allowing you to essentially tell the search engines and tell the digital assistants what you want to be verbalized. Now, I'm not going to go in depth into how to implement it, but I just want to show you a really quick example of what would this look like on page. The main thing is to note that the type for this, which Michelle talked about, you have different different schema types, is speakable specification. And this is where it essentially allows you to say, here is what we want it to be said within a given page. So this is going to be really important for people to think about as you start implementing your schema in the future, is what is the spoken content that you'd want for a given page? So when people are asking questions about your product or your brand, how would you have it verbally represented? Because how we speak is different than how we type. And so it's just going to mean that we have a lot more ways to impact essentially how the digital assistants are speaking about our content in the future. Now, I think it is worth calling out, just because we've been talking a lot about schema. The schema is a signal for the search engines. A signal meaning the search engines are looking at schema, and they're taking it into context for essentially featured snippet, rich answers, and position 0, but it's not a determining factor. If you don't have schema on the page, it's not to say that you won't become essentially a featured snippet. It's just much more difficult. And so it's one of those areas that as you look at the investment you're planning on making, it is a determining factor that will help you get to be that spoken response to get to that position 0, but it's not 100% required. So have you ever wondered, where do digital assistants pull their answers from? Right now, there's 4 core areas that you can impact that they're pulled from. And I'm just going to call them featured snippets instead of all the variations you could call them, but featured snippets do tend to be the most common answer. Next, depending on the type of query, is directory listings. Then you have essentially the knowledge graph and answer boxes, which the search engines essentially own that type of content. It's much more difficult for you as a brand or as a company to impact the knowledge graph, but schema does play into knowledge graph. That as it starts to pull the entities and the content from a page, that can impact how we pull together from a search engine standpoint the knowledge graph. The other area that's a little bit less known is this idea of voice actions or voice skills and chatbots. So that if you as a company or brand have created a skill that's enabled on Google Assistant, Alexa, or Cortana, that can actually be pulled in. So when you ask a question, that the assistant can go to that skill or can go to that specific chatbot that has been created and coded to give a spoken response. It's another way right now, since speakable schema is not 100% out of beta and it's not for content other than essentially news sites at the time, to allow you to optimize what you'd want spoken for a given answer or given question. The other area that you have no control over whatsoever right now is the digital assistants are pulling from their own persona and like the chit chat, funny joke type of responses. So if you were to say, hey Cortana, I love you, right now you can't essentially become that spoken response. That essentially is the persona and the response that the coders on the back end have pulled in together. So you might ask a question, and this is one I bought a house about 3 months ago where I have to do a ton of work on the house, where for me, I asked the question like, I know I need to buy equipment. So what's the difference between a circular saw and a table saw? And essentially what Cortana came back to is she gave me this answer talking about how the blades spin. And she spoke this answer, but what's really interesting, if you wonder where did she pull that from, it's exactly what we're talking about today. So if I do it on a desktop or on my mobile device, she'll also show me the answer as well as the spoken response. And if you notice it says see more results from Bing, when you click into this from Cortana, it essentially gives you a search results page. That's where you see that answer, that spoken response, is the featured snippet. and that's where it's pulling content from. Now, really quickly, I want you to look a little bit of page 1 on this mobile screen. So if you notice, you start to see some Lowe's advertisements in here that are ads. While we are not monetizing voice search today, neither of the search engines will let you pay to become that spoken response. Paid search ads and shopping ads can appear when someone says see more results. So it's a really interesting thing because you have the organic listings, you can have paid search ads, and you have the featured snippet showing. So you have opportunity to start creating campaigns around voice and optimizing for voice so that when people click that button, they can see it. So since we're predominantly talking about SEO today, let's talk about what on-page elements you can impact. So I'm not going to have time to go in depth because we only have a little bit of time today, but schema is one of those areas. But as you notice, Google went to mobile first optimization, mobile first index. What that mobile first means is that page speed is becoming much more important to you because they're taking page speed as almost a determining factor to determine how you rank and how you become potentially that spoken response. So you'll want to think about not only are you implementing schema, but on your overall organic search optimization plan, how fast does your page load? Because if you have a slow loading page, you could be penalized versus a page that loads really fast. The next two areas really are the crux of it. It's the fact that you have schema and you have that page speed, everything on the back end that you've been implementing, but the content, what you're writing is very important. And it's not just that the content's important, that as we start to adopt things like speakable schema markup, right now the search engines are going onto the page and there's a question that gets asked, like what's the difference between the table saw and the handsaw? Its response is in a conversational tone or voice, and it sounds much better when essentially a consumer asks a question to hear that coming back. Right now, the search engines can pull sections of content from across the page. It's not necessarily from a single paragraph, but thinking about how you respond to an answer and the content on your site in that more conversational tone and voice is going to be a signal that the search engines are looking at. And why is it important? I love this research. This specific one is from Stone Temple, now Proficient, where essentially they did a study back in 2018 asking like what percentage of responses and where are featured snippets coming into voice search, and roughly 40% of all spoken responses in their survey came from featured snippets. Not only was Stone Temple and Proficient's data showing this, but Backlinkio also did a voice search SEO study late in 2018. Their data mirrored almost exactly as well, which means the future of optimizing for voice search is optimizing for a featured snippet today. And there's a lot of opportunity you have for optimizing for featured snippets. So again, at the end of this presentation, I want you to download the deck and get access to it because I'm not going to have time. I would spend 20 to 30 minutes just going over this section of optimizing for featured snippets, but I wanted to just call out at a high level what you should be looking at and how you should be thinking about featured snippet optimization. Schema is a part of it, but there's other things that you have to do on your end. For instance, in order to even become a featured snippet, you already have to have a query ranking on page 1 within that top 10. Then you want to look at that query and think, what are the questions that people are asking? Because as we think about the behavior of digital assistants, people ask questions. And then you want to figure out how do you answer that question. And right now there's a couple of different ways you can choose to structure the answer. Paragraph, table, and list. If you download the deck, in the appendix, you'll actually see some research from SEMrush that shows how often different types of questions are featured snippets into each of these different answer types. And actually is really important because depending on how you're trying to rank and the type of question you're ranking for, you'll have a different structure to your answer and a different type of schema on the back end. Next, really this one is common sense. Provide a straightforward answer that adds value. And you want to think about it as you want to be short, and you want to add value, and you want to answer that question, and you want to make sure that that answer sounds natural when spoken aloud, so it doesn't sound very mechanical. You also want to think about that character count. You saw that screenshot a couple slides ago. Does the answer add value and fit on that mobile screen? You don't want to have too many characters being used, because then when somebody speaks the answer, it only gives you a certain amount of time from the digital assistants to be that spoken response. And then finally, the one that I know is, I joke about this all the time, is make it easy to find. The final thing you have to do is SEO best practices. Everything we should already be doing today, making sure you have fast loading pages, and finally making sure that you have schema as that determining, or as that signal to the search engines. So let me come into the response from the report right now and a little bit more about how people are using digital assistants and why that's important to you today. The report goes into 5 different sections. I have one key stat from each of those sections today, but I'm not going to go into every single section of the report. So part of the reason that schema and voice is becoming so important, where a huge percentage of you said you aren't spending budget or time to really optimize for voice, is because right now, when we redid our survey in March, and I'm going to be doing another round of the survey again in September, 69% of 5,000 respondents across the US, Canada, UK, Australia, and India had used a digital assistant. And that was in the past 3 to 6 months. So there's a lot of people using digital assistants today. The adoption of essentially digital assistants goes beyond just your mobile device. It's also going into smart speakers that, and we've run this survey multiple times over the last 2 years. We started off with really about 25 to 30% of people saying they would want to purchase a smart speaker or have one, to this last year, 75% of households estimated they'd be purchasing and implementing a smart speaker this calendar year. Now, the next 2 areas I'm not going to go into in depth, but it's trust and functionality. If you want to know more about this, download the report. It goes in depth. But the area that is important to a lot of people on this call today, I'm willing to bet, is VCommerce or shopping. And that's that over half of consumers expect to use voice with their digital assistant to help them make retail purchases in the next 5 years. So if you're a retail company, you need to figure out, how do you get voice-enabled shopping experiences so that you can meet consumer expectations? And where this is going is that search is no longer just 10 blue links on a page. We're moving from answers to actions. Now, I want to highlight actions because Google calls its skill the ability to invoke the digital assistant. They call it an action. That is not the type of action I'm talking about. I'm talking about the action of, I want to go, I want to do, I want to know, I want to schedule, to coordinate. It's the ability to do something using voice through either the digital assistant or that smart home speaker. And they're doing that by asking questions. So if you think about how are people engaging with voice today, we asked a couple of different formats that they can use. Roughly 1/3 of all respondents are using voice in their car, on TVs, and in smart home speakers. 72% of all of our respondents were using personal assistants, and 52% of those smart speaker users are using voice actions on a regular basis, meaning that if you have a voice action or a voice skill, the adoption is starting to come fairly fast, and so essentially people are engaging more and more often. Now, when you think about the opportunity for you today of how you optimize for voice search, I gave you some featured snippet optimization up above, but there is a little bit of variance that you can use essentially based on the query type. So whether somebody's asking an informational query, a navigational query, or transactional query, there's different things you can do. And the reason I break this out is when we ask people, how are you using voice search today? And we get the response of how they're doing it, you'll notice that roughly 68% of people are searching for a quick fact. But if I start to break this down into the type of queries, informational, navigational, transactional, you can start to see a sort of a breakdown that the actions that are happening and the questions and the engagement that's happening is happening across those 3 core areas today. So let's get into it. As I said, 68% of people are using voice to ask a question or find a fact. So the opportunity you have is featured snippet optimization or optimizing your content for the knowledge graph or the answer boxes. You do that again through schema markup, page speed, and making sure that your content has a conversational tone and language so it sounds good. On the navigational side, 65% of people are using voice to get directions and 48% of people are using voice to search for businesses, meaning that if I'm on the go, and a lot of times this is happening more so on mobile devices than on smart home speakers, I'm trying to find something. So it's going to be really important for you to own your directory listings, to have location optimized on-site content, so that in this example, as I was looking for microbreweries essentially in Redmond, my hometown, I can find your business and I can find the listing. And something that's becoming more and more interesting is that spoken response doesn't list every single company. It typically lists that top company. And when you start looking at local optimization and doing local SEO, a lot of times the customer reviews and the rankings and ratings do come into play. So you want to make sure that you are giving the most information in your directory listings possible, so that as people ask questions and say, oh, here's this company, Black Raven, it's closed right now, it opens at 3, that it can respond. The digital assistant can say, it's not open now, but it will open in 3 hours, etc. And finally, VCommerce, 25% of people today are using voice to make a purchase. That is today. We're not talking about in the future, right now. And so if you think about your customers, if you're selling something or trying to essentially get like a restaurant and get reservations, consumers are trying to do it right now. And so it's going to be important for you to make sure that you're having the right type of content. So you want product specific content on a given page. And when you implement schema, it's thinking about how do you not only do product specific schema and giving the right type of entity so that the products and or the reservations, that the bookings can happen, but you also think about that voice side of how would you want that to be verbalized. Customer reviews, they said, are going to be very important. Now, Michelle and I, as I was going into this presentation, she asked me about FAQs. So I do want to call this out very briefly, that right now, FAQ pages are also a signal, because it gives a lot of way to have conversational tone and language to answer very specific questions about a product. And I'm not saying that you need to go and create FAQ pages across the board, but if you have them, use this as a way to think about the questions people are asking and a way to create really conversational content for what the response is. And the final area on here is the voice actions and chatbots. What most people don't realize is that you can essentially create your voice action or your voice skill or your chatbot so that it can engage directly with the digital assistant. What that means is these transactional queries that you have will give you the opportunity to assist the assistants, meaning that if I am trying to book a restaurant or if I'm trying to make that purchase, Cortana, Alexa, Siri, the Google Assistant can go to my digital assistant that I've created for my brand or my product and service and take an answer and help me go through that path to purchase and essentially help with the customer decision journey to make it easier to get to that end action or end goal at the bottom of the funnel. Now, I love that Sachi actually said this at Build in this last year, is that where we're going is that brands will need their own agents to answer questions that their customers have and to converse with other digital assistants. And this is happening today on Cortana and it's happening today on Alexa. So it's one that we're going in that direction, and we have a lot of opportunity as brands to make sure that we are giving the best signals possible in order to answer the questions in a great way. And so I just briefly touched on the report. If you want to get the voice report, it is not a lead gen form. I've made sure that we have it so you can just go to the site and download it right away. Go to, and this is case sensitive, aka.ms/voice-sej, and you'll be able to get the entire report that goes into all the sections and all the research and data. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to you, Michelle.
Thanks so much for that, Christy. That was a lot of really fantastic information and data that you showed, especially in understanding the search adoption. What I want to talk about now before we jump into Q&A are just some key takeaways from what we were discussing. Obviously, search visibility was talked about a lot, right? Using schemas and structured data markup for your website content to really get increased search visibility. You're going to see significant increases in impressions, and where within the real estate of all of the various search features you can surface now, besides just the traditional 10 blue links. It's incredibly important. The future of search is evolving. Voice is a key component of that evolution, and voice search adoption continues to grow, as Christy demonstrated. And schemas play a really important role in enabling voice search. So, what Toa mentioned also was getting out of the competition by adding schemas to your website. So I hope this has been valuable for everybody. If you have any further questions, this is how you can contact us at Milestone to assist you. And now I think we're ready for some Q&A.
Excellent. Thanks, Michelle. So one of the big questions that we got a lot of was specifically for TOA and VMware, and how did you make the case to get the approval for overall schema implementation across such a large enterprise entity like VMware.com? What were the
Very
steps?
good question. Yeah, very, very good question and an interesting one. So yeah, it was an uphill struggle, but I think it all boils down to leveraging the latest technology in the market to get a competitive advantage. I think that's the case that I brought up amongst all the leadership team, and showed them the benefits of schema. How the whole search industry is moving towards voice search, and then if we can get onto that space early on, we get competitive advantage. So it was about presenting to them the case studies that Milestone had presented to us before, and then also showing the impact, the ROI that we could have out of the schema project. So we had several rounds of conversation and discussion. We also got Milestone on board to help us with the whole process of convincing the leadership team about it. But overall, I'm glad that we could implement it successfully and show the results.
Anything you'd like to add to that process, Michelle?
To the process specifically, do you mean how we
or the
implemented
process
it,
of
or?
making the case, process of getting approval?
Well, I mean, as Toa mentioned, it really is about demonstrating results, right? We're able to demonstrate results from prior client work that we had done, and starting out small, because like Toa mentioned, we didn't initially roll out all 500 URLs at once. It was a bit of a staged process. So obviously, when you can do it, if you can do a test, if you're struggling with getting budget approval for something like this, oftentimes suggesting a test, like let's take a look at, our primary landing pages and apply a schema there and see if we get any, get any uptick, if we see any difference in movement in ranking and impressions. That usually helps build a case up the chain to get more budget to really deploy it across the site, especially when you're looking at an enterprise size site.
Yeah, and I would just like to mention that the digital team here at VMware, they're receptive to innovation. So I think that also worked out on my side. So I'm really thankful to the leadership team who could help in supporting this innovative schema project.
And I think it's worth calling out, even though right now I'm not in the SEO role that's implementing schema across the board, I actually have been in that role in the last 5 years. And I found it somewhat easy to make the case, especially in e-commerce type scenarios, or scenarios where you really want to make sure your company and business information is readily available, to just explain the value of here's how the search engines pull this data and where it shows, and essentially showing some of the different research that's out there, like what Toa shared, of here's the incremental impressions and or clicks that you can get from having schema implemented, that many companies I've been at in the past, even 7 or 8 years ago, I was able to make the case when schema first came out, because I could see how it was becoming a signal to the search engines.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. One thing I've found in making that case as well is that ranking is one thing, but the ability to get the human eye interested in a result or a product or whatever it may be within the SERPs is totally something different, right? So like the CTR increase, the impression increases, all of that you were going over in your case study on VMware, and then also the other Milestone projects that you had worked on, Michelle, was pretty eye-opening, because you did not just focus specifically on traffic, but getting that CTR, getting more exposure in the SERPs, et cetera, which kind of leads me into the next question, is besides, is there an ROI that you can attribute the schema besides Google and Bing results alone? It's kind of a broad stroke of a question, but are there any other ROI or KPIs associated with schema implementation that's just outside of the world of SEO?
I honestly can't answer that because our focus, for our client engagements tends to be on obviously driving traffic and driving ROI from their websites. So our focus is on, everything around search, and that can include paid search, right? But again, you're still talking about Google and Bing and, traffic drivers in that regard. One thing leads to the other, right? So we've seen with other clients that not only has schema impacted their search visibility, but increasing visibility within the local pack, driving offline conversions, meaning, they're looking for map directions and clicks to call, things like that. We see incremental improvements across the board with actions that preclude an offline action. So I don't know if that answers the question, but those are the kinds of metrics that we look at. We're not just looking at search impressions and search visits. We're looking across the board at the totality of incremental increase in growth and ROI for the client's business.
Yeah, that is really interesting, especially on the local component, right? Because that's not always measured within SEO metrics per se.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and I would like to add that especially in the e-commerce sites, you will find that oftentimes SEO is also tied to conversions. So how many people are really using the voice device to purchase something on their site? So that can also tie up with the, the schema project that you'll be taking up.
Excellent. One other question about the VMware case study, which brought in a lot of different questions, is when you compare the results, do you know if you would have grown the same if you would not have implemented schema? Like, how do you tell that difference? Say if there's, for example, natural growth that's occurring because of an update or because of something on the site, maybe a speed update was done over that time, or a Google update. And this is coming from someone that's not questioning, but they're a big fan of schema and they're really trying to make this case internally. How do you show that that schema growth in addition or differentiated from normal organic growth?
Yeah, very good question. So what you do is you do split A/B testing. So what we did was we went with 500 URLs and not the entire set of URLs. So that's where we saw the difference. So we compared the results with the 500 URLs that we went live with and the 500 and the rest which did not have schema. So we saw that visits did increase, but on the ones which had schemas, they had a greater impact. And not just that, I think I had also shown a slide which talked about featured snippets. Now, featured snippets would essentially be a result of the schema project that we did. And again, it again boils down to the split A/B testing. So the URLs which had the schemas, they were showcasing better on the featured snippets results. So that's where we kind of made the conclusion that, okay, this set of URLs is working with the schema. So that means we're getting positive outcome out of the project.
Excellent. And in terms of prioritizing schema implementation, in addition to tests, were there certain schemas that were implemented that tended to show more positive results than others?
Yeah, so we had implemented breadcrumbs and products before, but I think the web pages, website, and corporation schemas that were rolled out with the Milestone project gave us better results, along with the product and breadcrumbs, of course.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. I have some Bing-oriented questions. Does Bing have a rich results, something like a rich results tester or a featured snippet tester like Google has to be able to go in and see how Bing is reading schema?
Right. Sorry, my voice was cracking. So right now in Webmaster Tools, there is not a schema tester, but it is something we are looking at adding into Webmaster Tools in the future.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Christy. And sorry about your voice today during the voice during the voice presentation. So next question is, oh, this is interesting. With featured snippets and the increase in featured snippets, specifically snippets which may have not had a link to the source or the result, did you see any decrease in other organic traffic when you saw an increase with featured snippets and rich snippets within the SERPs after implementing Schema across VMware?
Yeah, we did see a little bit of dip in the clicks because our pages were now appearing on the featured snippets. What that means is basically people were satisfied getting the answers in the featured snippets and they would not click. But what it was doing in turn was that these featured snippets, they're creating brand awareness, and eventually we saw the clicks rising up. So we saw a dip for maybe 1 or 2 months, and that's why I always say that have patience when you're doing any kind of SEO project, because it just takes a lot of time, and you'll get to see the ROI maybe not in just 1 month, but maybe over 6 months or 7 months down the line.
That's really interesting. So that brings impressions, in which used to be a very positive metric in the world of marketing and digital marketing. Now sometimes impressions, now sometimes there's an emphasis on clicks. So are you saying that you judge impressions to also be a positive KPI with regards to schema integration and overall SEO?
Absolutely. I think that's the key. I think the trend is changing with voice search coming in. So it's not just about getting clicks, but it's also showing up in the search results that drives that click-through rate, and that drives the voice search, the voice search results coming in through. So I think impressions is becoming equally important as the way Google is progressing.
Excellent, excellent. And this is kind of an open-ended question. Which structured data format is preferred by Google in Bing? More so utilizing JSONLD, hard coding schema into HTML or other code, microdata, et cetera, et cetera. Any recommendations there?
Christy, do you want to take that from the engine perspective?
I'm trying to.
Or not?
I think my voice is giving out enough. I'm having a hard time getting to speak. So I'm trying to think of also how to respond on that end. So right now, I think our preferred has been JSONLD in terms of content, but we accept all versions of the different content formats. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to defer because I can barely talk.
Sorry,
Okay.
Christy.
Yeah, no problem.
I don't think that there's a preference. I think that from our perspective, we like I said, we use JSONLD. It's pretty straightforward. You could use either anything that the spec produces. You can use. I think it depends on your own technology stack and ease of implementation for your use.
Excellent. And last question, are all case studies and data going to be made available after the presentation, Michelle?
Yeah, I believe the deck is going to be available for download. So everything's going to be in the deck that we shared. There's some additional supplemental information, I'll speak on your behalf here, Christy, that she mentioned that goes a little bit more deeply into optimizing for featured snippets and why featured snippets are so important when we're looking at schemas and voice search. So that's also included, some extra content we didn't go through. But to my knowledge, everything's going to be available. Toa, is it okay if we make your slides available for the audience as well?
Sure, and we might want to do some edits so we can take it offline.
Perfect.
Excellent. And the reason why I asked that question is because we had a lot of industry-specific schema questions come through. And Michelle, in your case studies, you had banks, brick and mortar, hotel, B2C, B2B, etc., and with the bulk of today's presentation and case study being B2B as well. I think there's a wide variety of examples and information that are available via the slides today. So just to remind everyone, we're going to make the video, slides, and additional resources from Bing available. We'll be sending that to you in an email along with a recap on the SEJ site. Michelle, Toa, and Christy, thank you so much for attending today. It's been learned a lot during today's presentation, and it's been fantastic, and we got everything done in time.
Thank you so much, Lauren. It's been great.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Get better, Christy.
Thank you, Christy.
Yeah, be better.
Yeah, please feel better. Thanks again, everyone. Thank you for your questions. We're going to be going through a lot of the questions and sending them over to the team afterwards. So hopefully we'll be able to get everything answered for you. You asked for some great resources on Schema, so we'll put that list together. And we also have plenty of posts over on searchenginejournal.com for you to check out. So just do a site-specific Schema, site equals searchenginejournal.com, and you'll have plenty of stuff there. Also, our next SEJ marketing think tank will be on PPC. It's how to improve your PPC performance starting today with 7 easy expert actions and the team at Adzuma. So stay tuned for that. That will be on August 14th. And after today's webinar is over, we're going to have a quick survey that you can fill out. If you could take a minute or so, do that. It's fantastic. It really just helps us make this content that we're delivering to you so much better in the long run. So again, thanks everyone. This has been Lauren Baker, founder of Search Engine Journal, with Michelle from Milestone, Toa from VMware, and Christy from Bing, and we'll be signing off. Have a good day.